Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick, back to remind you guys that X-Wing First Edition does still exist, and I want to have a bit of a chat about it. Now, a little while ago, I started these Brewing with videos. In fact, namely in the last couple of waves that were released, we talked about more than R5TK, because I wanted to have a chat about some new and upcoming cards that may or may not have some weird impacts on the meta or just be fun to brew around with. And with this current wave that's about to come out, Wave 14, we do have a couple of cards, namely Director Krennic and Saw Gerrera, that I want to make videos on. But the content for X-Wing First Edition has been put somewhat in limbo because of the announcement of X-Wing Second Edition. No doubt, I'm sure you guys are also noticed that the shift in focus has moved firmly away from X-Wing First Edition. But nevertheless, the format of the game is in such an interesting place right now. I just get the impression, especially with the recent announcement of what is on the Cavern Angel Zealot, that FFG are considering First Edition a bit of a playground format now. They're going to give us some really fun tools just to round out X-Wing First Edition in Wave 14, and that'll be that. And for that reason alone, I'm still keen to make a few of these brewing videos and have a chat about some of the final things that we can do with the format, especially considering we don't have the costings of any of the cards in Second Edition. Once that happens, we'll start to do some of these videos on those, but for the time being, let's have a look at some of the most fun elements from Wave 14 for First Edition. And in this video, I want to talk about Director Krennic, because he was all the hype before X-Wing Second Edition was announced. And we've actually had him revealed also in Second Edition. In fact, pretty much on the day that X-Wing Second Edition was announced, we had the Team Covenant demo with the new version of Director Krennic. And the new version of Director Krennic is a lot less powerful overall than the old one, which leads us to ask, hey, why would you create this cool new ability just to nerf it within a couple of months of it being released? And I think the answer is pretty clear. The reason that the First Edition Director Krennic exists in the more powerful state that it is in is because FFG have to make an effort to try and fix the small platforms on the Empire. Whereas in Second Edition, they've had a nerf to auto damage, bombs, all the kind of stuff that had pretty much kept ties out of the game, barring a few very specialist lists. So that specific fix is no longer needed, and now they can use this new design of Director Krennic, which is less powerful overall, but can work on any ship in the faction, which is really, really cool. Also, the original version gifts free target locks to his own platform, which is really, really cool, but that is a thing that FFG have pretty much stated outright they're not going to do. Free target locks are no longer a thing. Free actions overall seem to be a lot less powerful. So the new version of Director Krennic instead just gives his platform the target lock action. That's going to be handy on TIE Reapers, on Lambda class shuttles, possibly even the TIE Phantom if it still has the crew slot. But like anything in X-Wing, especially when we get new FAQs and they're about to announce that they're going to make something a lot less powerful, it probably means that the existing version of that card or pilot is going to be worth playing around with, because it's going to be very powerful in the meantime. And that's why I want to have a chat about this guy today. Now, when Director Krennic was originally revealed, I did have a quick chat about some of the builds that I think will work well with him. Specifically with Rack and Whisper, I think those two together are just going to make a lot of sense. Director Krennic can go onto Rack, and that can actually cause Whisper to provide Rack with free target locks. But some of the responses I got after that were very interesting, because a lot of you pointed out, hey, you can just put Director Krennic straight onto Whisper. The optimized prototype card can still go onto Whisper. It can be on the same platform as Director Krennic, and then Whisper can provide herself with free target locks, which is really, really good, because usually Whisper leans into fire control systems in order to give herself target locks. And Director Krennic in this scenario actually does exactly the same thing, giving him much more value overall. And this actually frees up the system slot on Whisper to take Collision Detector, which again is a nice tool to have on Whisper. It's not super powerful, but basically it means in these Whisper lists you can decloak over a rock. Say, for example, you only take debris fields. You can then guarantee that Whisper can decloak wherever she wants, apart from over your opponent's rocks, and never take any damage, which really frees up her movement, which makes the already powerful platform just a bit more powerful. So there certainly is a lot of value to be had out of Krennic. But before we move on to those lists, let's take a look at a couple of lists that use Director Krennic on the Decimator in order to buff the friendly ship he's flying near. And this one was submitted by Walter Moore. This is Rack with Sunta Fel. Rack has VI, Tactical Officer, Director Krennic Darth Vader engine upgrades, and the Decimator title, and Sunta Fel has the Royal Guard title, auto thrusters, push limits, and shield upgrades. And I gotta say, shield upgrades is interesting on Sunterfell because usually we'd err on the side of stealth device, but also this list does not contain Palpatine, which means that the 1 extra dice of stealth device is actually not quite as powerful overall, so I can see the logic in wanting to take shield upgrades. I will say though, I probably still prefer stealth device because it means you can repeatedly avoid getting hit. The ceiling on stealth device is much higher than shield upgrade. Shield upgrade is just a guaranteed 1 point less of being shot, but if stealth device does work in a game, it'll mean multiple shots where Suntir doesn't get hit, and that is way better than shield upgrade. So for that reason, I'd probably go for stealth device, but still shield upgrade is good. It means alongside Krennic, Sunterfell actually gets 2 shields, and that could deflect a critical early on in the game, which could be the difference between Sunterfell living and dying. So yeah, I can see the logic here, that's for sure. Apart from that, I like the list a lot. Vader and Tactical Officer alongside Krennic makes a lot of sense. I spoke before about Darth Vader alongside Krennic. I think the two work really, really well together. It is a little bit awkward having Vader on Rack with VI because it means that Rack shoots first. I think ideally we'd want Rack to shoot second, so what can happen then is Sunterfell can shoot a ship, Rack can then take a target lock off of it, Rack can then shoot afterwards, punch into the hull, and then Vader can give them a crit. The fact that Rack has to go first kind of messes up the timing of all of that, so you might want to consider taking off VI, maybe putting on adaptability to pilot skill match these guys so you can always choose the order in which they shoot. I think that has just a little bit more power than having Rack up at PS10. Also, because you have Tactical Officer, you're also going to want to have Rack flying first, which means you can give Sunterfell an action before he stresses himself out from push to limit, so that's another thing to consider. And another decimator variant we have here by Ryan Gehrs, this is Tyrannical High Command with Captain Oiken alongside Vader. Oiken has push to limit, Emperor Palpatine, Director Krennic, engine upgrade, Dauntless, and Vader has Intensity, Advanced Targeting Computer, engine upgrades, and the TIE X1 title. And just on what I was previously talking about, we can see that we've taken a decimator with a much lower pilot skill with push limits, and this means the order of things happening are always working in your favour. You want Vader to shoot first so he can give Captain Oiken that target lock. But more to the point, just as a bit of a thought experiment, this is really cool to see because it seems like we can theoretically get Emperor Palpatine onto a list alongside Director Krennic, and Director Krennic strikes me as the kind of card that is designed to kind of replace what Palpatine's trying to do. Obviously Palpatine is going to be powerful alongside him no matter what, but Director Krennic is about boosting one other ship, so you kind of got to ask yourself, how far is this pushing Darth Vader? Having Palpatine and Krennic to back him up is just going to be devastating. You can pretty much guarantee on all of his attacks you're going to get multiple crits. In fact, if Darth Vader rolls 2 blanks, he can still turn it into 3 points of damage. Because his title gives him an extra critical result, Director Krennic can cancel one of those dice in order to remove your opponent's shield, and Palp can turn the other dice into another critical. So it just goes to show how much you can sort of get if you stack on these support characters alongside Vader. I will say there is an argument here that you have pushed the support role a bit too far, and by not capitalizing on your decimator by taking something like Rack, you can't sink in enough damage with that platform, and it might cause the list to underperform. But nevertheless, I love the concept and I'd really like to see this on a table just to see how far we can push one of these aces. Alright, so we've got a few lists left and these all use Krennic on a platform that can take the optimized prototype card. In fact, I'd say there's a strong argument in each of these to actually have both cards on the same platform. This next one's by Catherine Nyxsera, with Whisper, the Inquisitor, and Omega Leader. Whisper has VI, Advanced Sensors, Director Krennic, Advanced Cloaking Device. Inquisitor has taken his standard bill with PTL, Auto Thrusters, and his title. And Omega Leader has a score to settle at Advanced Optics. And the first thing I want to say, I think it's really, really cool that Krennic has freed up that system slot to provide Whisper with Advanced Sensors. However, I will say Whisper now costs 45 points, and that is a lot. That puts a massive target on Whisper's head, but hopefully, in theory, with that extra shield that Director Krennic is providing his platform and advanced sensors, Whisper should be difficult enough to hit and hardy enough to take enough damage so that she always survives into the late game. That's the theory anyway. However, having said that, Director Krennic can provide the optimized prototype card to the Inquisitor or Omega Leader. I'm not sure how comfortable I would be doing that, just considering how much you've stacked Whisper, and considering we've put on advanced sensors, it is pretty clear to me that you do want to do that anyway, so that's fair enough. In any case, the Inquisitor and Omega Leader are pilot skill matched and can do their job just fine by themselves. These guys are often paired alongside a Palp Shuttle, So you have to remember they're getting a little less support than they would in their sort of tier versions of their list. So to counteract that, you have to make sure Whisper does enough damage and has enough board presence to really capitalize off this. And I think in theory this should work, you just need a good pilot at the helm. This is absolutely not a list for beginners, but that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. And next we have a list by Clarke, which uses 2 of the TIE Phantoms, Whisper and Echo, alongside the TIE Fighter Gehrs. And both of those Phantoms have similar builds with Veteran Instincts and Advanced Cloaking Device, except Whisper has Director Krennic and Fire Control Systems, and Echo has Agent Callus and Collision Detector. And right off the bat, I think it is worth having a look at those system slot upgrades. Collision Detector is fantastic, but at the cost of Fire Control Systems, that's not really ideal. I know we can't afford to have both fire control systems, but remember that Director Krennic is giving his platform free target locks, and for that reason I'd actually switch these around, so Fire Control Systems is on Echo and Collision Detector is on Whisper. Indeed, that might be smart regardless, because it gives Whisper a bit more freedom to move around, and that gives a little bit more protection to Director Krennic, which is probably what we want to try and do here anyway. But what's really cool about this is we have a lot of choices in terms of what to do with Director Krennic. Now, Director Krennic himself gives his ships free target lock, but it doesn't matter so much where the optimized prototype goes. It is worth noting that if optimized prototype is on Whisper, it gives himself a much higher chance of activating. If it's on Echo on Gehrs, it means that they might get out of range, and then Director Krennic would not be providing his ship with free target locks. That might not be the end of the world, but it is something worth considering. There is also the issue that Whisper again is the most expensive ship in this list, and by giving her optimized prototype, it might just make it a little bit too tantalizing for your opponent to go after her. And from that point of view, if you give it to Echo, you might be able to give your list a nice bit of unpredictability and give Echo that extra tool. So if your opponent does go for the more expensive ship in Whisper, it means that Echo can capitalize off surviving a little bit longer and use that ability to do more damage to your opponent, which could be quite cool. Also, Gehrs has stealth device, and yeah, I don't know, but I guess that's okay. Gehrs is a very good defensive ship. You could theoretically put the optimized prototype on Gehrs, but I still err on the side of Echo just because of how well that 4 dice can capitalize off that ability. I guess at the end of the day, Gehrs is only 22 points, so that's not so bad. You just got to make sure that your TIE Phantoms can basically do all the work for you. The last list we're going to take a look at here is a bit of an interesting one. This is kind of like an Imperial control list, and I like the thinking behind it. This is Whisper alongside 2 Scarif-based pilots, and in this instance, you probably want to make sure that Whisper always takes the optimized prototype card. Whisper has Veteran Instincts, Director Krennic, Advanced Cloaking Device, and Collision Detector, and both of the Scarif-based pilots have ISB Slicer, Tactician, Advanced Ailerons, and Lightweight Frame. And yeah, I find that really interesting because those Scarif-based pilots can be really annoying with taking all those jam tokens and all those stress tokens and locking down your opponent. And it basically means Whisper has to do all the work for you. But having said that, Whisper has an extra shield and a really powerful offensive ability. You can make the argument here that simply Whisper can outvalue your opponent's ships. You've just got to make sure she basically doesn't get hit. That's the real clincher here. With these TIE Phantoms, you just got to be so careful. And the Scarif-based pilot here is a nice, affordable control build that with 3 red dice still might do a fair bit of damage. And I think that's what you got to do here. You got to manage to outvalue your opponent. You got to lock down their ships and sink in enough damage. And I think this list does have the potential to do that. Again, it just is not a list for novices. You really got to make sure that Whisper gives you as much value as she possibly can. Because if Whisper dies early, you've just got no chance. And that's just something to be really cautious with. But having said that, Whisper has a tool on her tool belt that she never had before in Director Krennic. And that can be the difference between making her unplayable and really powerful. And that's what all of these really boil down to. Can Director Krennic overcome the issues that Whisper has, not being flown alongside Rack or Palpatine or something like that? Which are things that she usually relies on as a bit of a crutch. Being as expensive as she is, she basically has to perform. And in second edition, the TIE Phantom is actually losing one of its red dice, and as a result is going to be significantly cheaper, meaning there's a lot less pressure on the TIE Phantom to perform within these lists, and basically do all the work themselves. But in first edition, Director Krennic gives us this option to really power out a lot of value in the support role. And if all goes well, it's going to mean that these small Imperial platforms are going to perform a lot better, and just be a bit more balanced towards the end of the first edition meta, and hopefully perform okay alongside auto damage and bombs. That's the main thing that we're concerned about as pilots of the various TIE platforms. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned, I'm going to make another one of these videos on some spicy Rebel builds. When we get another lull in the schedule, I know the second this video goes out, there'll be a whole heap of more spoilers for 2nd edition to talk about. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and I will catch you guys later.